Genesis 6:22 tells us that Noah did everything as God commanded him to. Here, the Bible is talking about the ark. Noah was told to build an ark before the flood came, and Noah obeyed God. When God told him to put two of each animal, Noah obeyed God, just as God had commanded him to. Now, you may say, I'm not called to build an ark. I don't need to follow instructions as Noah did. But the Bible tells us in Jeremiah 29:11, and it says, For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. Now, Noah's obedience to God, to what God had commanded him, led him to an expected end. Now, God's plan for Noah and his family was to save them from the flood. Noah's obedience is what, in doing what God said, is what led him to an expected end. Now, in our lives, like I said, we might not have been called to build an ark or something similar, but like Jeremiah says, God has plans for our lives, and obedience to those plans are what brings us to the expected end that God has for us. Sometimes we allow compromise to come in, is I'll follow God in this step and that step and not the other. But that compromise does not bring us to the expected end that God has for our lives. We are called to, or we are commanded to obey what God says. And just like Noah, we are to do everything that God or has commanded us to do. Compromise leads us away from the expected end that God says in Jeremiah 20, the word of the Lord says in Jeremiah 29:11. Thank you and have a good day.